Dana. Here with Mr. Chris Fisher. He is out at the pool, hanging out with his kids and his family, and I am slaving away here at the microphone. On vacation, but never disconnected from the Linux community and technology community. Thanks so much for being here with us. Episode 17, guys, of the Ask Noah Show, and a huge thank you to everyone who is out there supporting us. Of course, thank you very much to Chris Fisher, owner and operator of Jupiter Broadcasting, for throwing his weight and support behind the program, and of course, KEQQ Logos Radio, our home in Grand Forks, North Dakota, the radio station, for keeping us on the air. And thanks to our crew, Sarah, who screens your calls. Again, my wife, giving up her family vacation to come screen calls for us. Ben, back at the studio, keeping us going strong. Thank you very much. And Rakai, our video editor, who takes this mess of a show, adds some video elements, and puts out a show for you guys to consume. And, you know, we couldn't do this show without you, the audience. So thank you guys. Everyone who is a part of the audience, everyone who is a part of this show, thank you. Those of you in the Telegram group, telegram.asknoahshow.com, in our Reddit, asknoahshow.reddit.com, and of course those of you who frequent the Ask Noah dashboard. You can do that at asknoahshow.com. The biggest thank you, though, really, of the whole community is reserved for those of us who patiently wait on hold. Those of you who patiently wait on hold, who put up with shorter than normal conversations, all to make this show possible. It's kind of funny. I go back and I read the chat logs anytime we get off the air. I like to know if there was feedback that was coming in. I go back and take a look at the Telegram group and see what people are saying in there. Of course, we read the emails and stuff that people send in for the show. And it's interesting. I'll see comments like somebody will say, I was talking to Noah, and then all of a sudden I realized that he had already moved on to the next call, or he'd already moved on. And so I realized I was talking to myself. And that is something that, we in the broadcast industry is fairly, is fairly accepted that, I as a host, when I think that the call is time to move on, or when I see a stack of other calls that I need to get to, then that's kind of my discretion. But at the same time, as a listener, I definitely acknowledge and want to point out the fact that, we appreciate the fact that you guys put up with that kind of standard, that, when you ask a question, we'll take your question, make it into show content, and then when that value runs out, then we move on. And we really appreciate you being understanding about that. And there's some of you that call in time and time again. We definitely appreciate you guys. Now, we have to make some changes to the show. Nothing huge, nothing big. But there are some minor production tweaks that we're going to have to make. And by the way, we might actually be able to avoid making a few of them. If there is anyone out there that can connect me to a human being at YouTube, let me know. That would be really terrific, and it would save me a ton of work. Because despite the fact that I have paid for Creative Commons license, despite the fact that Google themselves admits that all the content we play here is Creative Commons licensed, their stupid robot keeps flagging my outro music. My legally purchased Creative Commons licensed outro music. And the frustration has gotten to the point where we're just going to have to look into something else. But I would like to not have to look into something else. So if there's somebody out there that can help me with that, reach out to me via our contact link. Actually, you know what? I take that back. This is important enough to me. If you have the answer to this particular question, please email me directly, noah@altispeed.com. That's Noah at ALTISPEED.com. And I'd like to see how's that for irony? The host of the Ask Noah Show is asking the audience for help with the Ask Noah Show. Now, since we have to make some changes anyway, and I'm aiming for episode 20, we'll see what actually happens. I'm not even here this week. I'm out at, hanging out in Bozeman, but we'll see if I can actually get the timing to align. I would like to have all of the changes set up for episode 20. But now's the time to speak up. If there's something that you're unhappy with the show, if there's a change you'd like to suggest, now is the time to let me know. Maybe you want to hear more callers. Maybe you're sick of the sound of Noah's voice. Maybe you'd like to hear us take more calls. Now, the truth is, to date, we have only ever not taken one call. There's only ever one call in the call queue that we didn't get to on air. Every other time, every other call that's come in, we have put on air. That were appropriate, I guess I should say. I mean, if you call up, swearing and screaming, we're not gonna air that. But I don't know. There's a whole lot we can do on that front to take more phone calls, but it would certainly be information we'd like to know. And also, if you'd like to hear, I know there's been an ongoing discussion about taking emails on air. And actually, let me get that program fired back up. Live at asknoahshow.com if you want to send us an email. We'd love to take your emails live here on the air. We're just going to get this fired up. So there we go. Okay, so now I'm ready to take emails live at AskNoahShow.com if that's something that you want to do. But basically, if you have a suggestion for the show, I'd like to hear it. So, let us know. Use the contact form, AskNoahShow.com, or, heck, send it to live at AskNoahShow.com. I don't care, whichever you want to do. But I'm taking all of your suggestions. And, of course, make sure to head over to the Ask Noah dashboard, and that's where you can keep up to date. Again, phone lines are open 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 450-6624. The email live at AskNoahShow.com. Now, last week, we were talking about LibVirt. We were talking about LibVirt, and I was telling you some of the experiences that I had. Now, a good friend of mine, I had the opportunity of kind of going through this battle together. Chris DeLuca from West Virginia, and we were out. We did a coverage out at his school a couple months back, and then just last month we met up at Southeast Linux Fest. Chris is, a VM master. He traditionally worked a lot with VMware, and he is coming around to see the light with LibVirt. And Chris and I have been kind of doing this together, and Chris is joining us tonight to talk with us. Hey, Chris, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah, thanks. And thank you so much for taking time out of your vacation and also on the 4th of July to do the show. I really appreciate it.
Hey, man, it's fun. Now, let me ask you something. Is this your inaugural stop on the Ask Noah Show? Have you been? I mean, I know you were part of the pre-episode. You called in with a couple questions, but this is the first time you've ever been on the Ask Noah Show, yeah?
Since you've gone live on the radio, yes, I believe so.
Outstanding. Well, welcome. So let's start from the beginning. So basically, I was sitting there. I had my issues over at one of my clients, and I was complaining to you, saying how upset I was at Hyper-V, and you in your wisdom said, I got some news for you. Hyper-V sucks. Nobody actually uses it in production that cares about their stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's super helpful. That's really what I wanted to hear. Thanks. But no. So then I started telling you. I said, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm going to restructure these things. And then you actually went out and bought some hardware. Tell me that story.
Yeah, actually, it has not arrived yet, but following your suggestions, I found some pretty inexpensive hardware online, as well as to play with. I bought a Lenovo T430 laptop with just 8 gigs of RAM and a 500 gig hard drive, and like you've already said many times, I am amazed at what LibVirt will do on such limited hardware.
Yeah, that laptop was really what I was kind of referring to, is the fact that you have this laptop. That's what you originally bought to kind of test some of this stuff out, test the waters out, so to speak, before you actually dove in, right?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And the laptop is what the T430s are, 5-year-old hardware, and it was purchased used, and it works beautifully.
That's fantastic. So I guess, so tell me this, what kind of things have you looked to replace, like what kind of things were you doing in VMware that you're now saying, I can knock that out at no cost to my clients with LibVirt?
Well, my client actually doesn't have VMware. I run VMware in my day job, but I actually would like to take their Windows server like you have and virtualize it, and then use the massive hardware that they're running the server doing absolutely nothing on, and move it back to LibVirt virtualized on this, as well as move some of their desktops if I can, because my client has some 7-year-old desktops, as you can imagine, Windows 7 years old. It runs like garbage. And if I could utilize this, I believe it's a 12-core Dell server, and utilize it and maybe put some thin clients on their desk, I think that they would actually have faster machines and get more work done with less power usage, and VMware, the price of VMware compared to what, there's no competition there.
So I know one of the things, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give you my thunder, but basically one of the things that I had been playing with after we got LibVirt done and we had virtualized everything was, I said, okay, I'm going to take these workstations that, there's places where they just have to run some Windows software. There's just two ways about it. I never, ever advocate running Windows itself. In fact, you can always get tasks done outside of any particular Windows software, but sometimes you have users that they are just accustomed to a given set of software. In this case, it's a particular piece of accounting software. They want to run that particular software, and so as a consultant, I am just told as a static, we need to run XYZ software. That's not really up for debate. But we never ever sign with a client where everything is set in stone, right? Where they say, like, you will do XYZ. We want a computer set up to run this piece of software. We never sign for that because we wouldn't be able to manage it effectively. We're not going to put a solution into place that we know is going to burn the house to the ground. And so one of the things that we have done is we have taken all of those virtualized workstations, and in this case, we virtualized that workstation that we run that accounting software, and then we're letting them RDP into it. Now, you can do that on Linux. You can use Remina. It's a great client, works very, very well. Tweak those settings, and you can get darn near native performance, especially if you're on a LAN. But Chris, you and I have been working on something a little cool. You and I started by looking at N Computing's, L300, I believe it is, the little thin client that will facilitate basically an RDP connection over their vServer software. But you and I are trying to replicate that over Raspberry Pis. Talk about that.
Well, you are actually the one who pointed it out to me, and the price of Raspberry Pis being what they are, I couldn't not do it. So I followed your suggestion. I purchased a Raspberry Pi. The software was fairly easy to set up. I mean, you basically just DD it onto an SD card, stick it in the Pi, boot the Pi. The only issues I have run into, mainly because I'm pushing the graphics limits of the Pi. The only issues I've run into have been like playing YouTube or video. Other than that, for basic computing tasks, browsing email, typing documents, I don't think that they would even notice a difference. And like you said, it is just an RDP session to a Windows desktop, and my client does run some proprietary accounting software that they need to use. Actually, it's a point-of-sale software. It only runs on Windows, so if I could do that, oh my goodness, the Pi is amazing.
So, and one of the things that I'm looking at doing is kind of similar to you is, and I know we've talked about this, as my client, we both need to move audio over, and I can't remember your reason for doing it. Mine was that they have some audio editing software, and this audio, it's not complex audio editing, but they just basically need to listen to dictation, so they need to stop, play, speed up, slow down, rewind, fast forward, those kind of things, and so audio redirection is very important. But this operating system that you and I are using, and we'll have a link in the show notes, I think it's the Raspberry Pi Thin Client operating system. But basically what you do is you open up a config file and you say, this is the RDP server I want you to connect to, this is the port I want you to connect through, here's the username, I want you to redirect audio, I want you to redirect USB. You can even get in there so granular as to say, I just want you to redirect USB drives, not USB devices, all that kind of stuff. And then basically when that Raspberry Pi boots up, it boots up into a full screen 1080p session of that RDP session. And that, to me is a real great way to get Windows doing what Windows does best, which is run, a plethora of software. And then you layer that on top of what Linux does best, which is run securely and, with great stability, on the bare metal. And you and I have talked about how we are making sterile copies then, or snapshots of those VMs, and then we can go back and restore.
That is mainly my reason, because I have fought twice Windows viruses that have caused me to have to go down and recover machines from backup, not to mention hundreds of gigs of data from backup that have been corrupted by, I believe it was a CryptoLocker variant. And you actually to be able to utilize that in libvirt to bring that back in minutes rather than hours, remotely rather than driving for an hour to my client, is just it goes without saying how well that works.
Yeah, because you actually had a situation where you had a client that you had to drive a significant amount of time just to restore from backups, and then it took a couple of hours. So, it'd be interesting to stay in contact with you, Chris. And thank you so much for the call, coming on the show, and chatting with us, explaining, what's going on with you. And it'll be kind of, it's been, let me tell you, it has been super fun to have a friend to go through this with. I don't know if any of you have ever geeked out, by yourself and then ever had the opportunity to geek out with a friend. But when you and a friend are exploring the same piece of technology at the same time, and then that guy comes back and he says, Chris will come back and he'll say, this is what I found that I can do with it. You should try this. And I'll say, oh, well, this is what I found that I can do with it. You should try this. And it's been like nonstop over the last, week and a half. And, here's another thing too. I'll take a moment and then I'm going to get to some of the other calls here. There's a couple of people that reached out and they said, well, why doesn't Noah ever talk about Proxmox? That's really weird. It's such a great piece of software. And it is. It is a fantastic piece of software. In fact, I go so far as to say, if you have no experience with virtualization and you want to set up a virtualization, I'll learn how to talk. That's what I'll do. And then after I learn how to talk, then I'll tell you that if you want to learn how to set up a virtualization host and you want to do it today, quickly and efficiently, go do Proxmox, because Proxmox is the appliance solution to open source virtualization, and it supports clustering and it's got this great web UI. I mean, I don't have enough good things to say about Proxmox. It's a great solution, and everyone should check it out if you haven't. As to why I am not using Proxmox, it's a really dumb reason actually, but I went through a lot of the Red Hat certification courses, and they taught us how to use libvirt and virt-manager, and you can actually control because Proxmox is really just a really fancy front end to libvirt. Basically, I mean, it's running on libvirt. My understanding is the underpinnings are, so you can actually manage it with virt-manager, no problem. Of course, you can manage VMware with virt-manager too, but I learned how to do it a certain way, and so I've just continued to do it that way. And when I come across something I can't do in virt-manager with libvirt, I will totally start looking for something else. But that is not to say that there is anything wrong with Proxmox or Noah doesn't like it. No. Proxmox is amazing. It has 2 thumbs way up from the Ask Noah show. Very, very much like Proxmox. James is calling from Pennsylvania. Hi, James. Welcome to the Ask Noah show.
Thank you, Noah. I'm looking to do an AMD Ryzen 7 build, and I just wanted to, I guess I've had a little bit of conflicting information about, as far as graphics, AMD versus NVIDIA, and I just wanted to kind of get your take or understanding on that, which would be the better option.
Well, I tell you what, James, I guess my first thought is to say NVIDIA. If you want to know where the safe, happy zone is, it's going to be NVIDIA. I have used NVIDIA cards on every machine known to man, all the way from the cheap little crappy NVIDIA cards you buy at Best Buy made by PNY, or even I forget what's their in-store brand, Insignia or whatever their in-store brand thing is, for $49, just because I had a client that needed 2 displays, and so I needed, an additional graphics card. I've used NVIDIA chipsets all the way from those, all the way up to the one that's in my personal workstation, which is, considerably more expensive. And all of those, everything in between, has been flawless under Linux. The only exception to that is there's a couple laptops where I've had some issues with a particular version of the NVIDIA driver with Lux. And you can't, if you encrypt the hard drive and have NVIDIA, which is kind of weird 2 things to go together, but if you do that, it causes some sort of a conflict. So that's the safe choice. However, if you're asking me if I was building a Ryzen machine, would I go with AMD or NVIDIA? Well, to be honest, the reason we're going with Ryzen is because we're trying to eke out every little bit of performance for our dollar, right? And so if we're willing to take that chance with the CPU, why wouldn't we take that chance with the GPU? And, it's kind of nice just to say, you have, AMD all from the ground up, and you can build a machine for a couple bucks less that kicks the crap out of an Intel box,
Yeah. Okay.
Does that give you some ideas?
Is there anything? Yeah. Is there any kind of specific series or anything that is either known to work better or less well with Linux? Is there anything I should be looking for in particular?
Well, if you got the money for it, I know the 1080.
I would go the AMD route.
Oh, okay, the AMD route. I don't know anything off the top of my head, but I tell you what I will do. I will do a little bit of digging here when I get off the air, and I will throw a couple suggestions for you. I'll tell you what I would buy if I was going to go out and buy an AMD graphics card. What I would be buying on Linux. I'll have those available for you in the show notes. Thank you very much for the call, and do give us a call back and let me know how that goes when that build comes together. That'll be really interesting to see, because I have the makings of a Ryzen box, and one of these days I'm gonna get to it. I'm gonna finish it up, but yeah, give us a call back. I'd love to hear how that works out. Again, phone lines are open, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624, or live at AskNoahShow.com. Let's see here. James writes in at live at AskNoahShow.com and says, hi, Noah. Love the show. I have a bit of a beginner question for you. Is there a best practice of where to put an app image? I download things and they end up in my downloads folder, but I'm not sure where to put them after that. I have both OpenShot and Telegram just sitting in the downloads folder, and that's where I've been launching them from, just because I'm not sure where to put them long term. Well, Opt is a good place for throwing a lot of that stuff. IBM actually, when they have their Lotus Domino server, both the server and the user applications, basically it's just a folder full of files, and everything runs out of there, and they just create a Lotus folder inside of Opt and put it there. That might be a decent place. Home directory wouldn't be a bad place. If I'm doing something that's totally just kind of out there in the open, if I'm like I need a working directory, or if I'm doing a video project and I want a project scratch folder or something like that, usually I throw it in my home folder, just because that way I can, A, if I need to clean up hard drive space, I know where I'm looking for things. B, if I want to back something up when I go to restore the computer, the number one place I'm looking for is my home folder. So that's probably not a bad place to check either. Let's see here. Who else writes in? This is some sort of forward. Inganko? I'm probably Mr. Dominguez. We'll call you Mr. Dominguez. Writes in and says, I went ahead and set up 2 C-File server, and they are running awesome. I do recall that you're working on a backup solution at Ultispeed. I currently have just mirrored drives, but I'm not comfortable with working with just mirrored drives. Did you ever find a solution? Suggestions? Thanks. I love the show. Well, I'm probably not telling you anything you don't already know. But mirroring drives is not a backup solution. And, there's one thing. We are going to do an episode on backup solutions. The reality is that I am so sick in the community of hearing people say, well, that's not a backup solution. That's not a real backup solution. You really should have a different backup solution, because the reality is the backup solution that you have is better than the best backup solution you've dreamt up that you're going to get to someday. Okay. So I don't care if your backup solution is just once a week you could go in there and copy some files off onto an external drive. Is it the best backup solution? No. And we can all talk about why that is. But I would rather somebody do that than just not back up their files because somebody told them that wasn't a backup solution. I remember this event pretty clearly. I was at Southeast Linux Fest. This was a couple years ago. I was standing in line with a good friend of mine, and he was in line behind me, and he was talking about his new backup solution. His new backup solution was he had a new RAID 5 system that he put in, and there's right off the bat there's somebody right behind him. Well, that's not a real backup solution. You shouldn't really even bother with that because that's not going to back up your data. And he's right. If that machine gets infected, if CryptoLocker infects it or whatever, even if he doesn't, even if he keeps his files completely, totally safe, he has a friend that comes over and that person has a Windows computer and that Windows computer has CryptoLocker on it and it accesses a Samba share on his computer. It is going to encrypt his files and it's not a backup solution. It's not. It's not the best backup solution anyway. But it was better than what he had, which was nothing. It was better than he just having one single hard drive in his computer and a wing and a prayer that nothing was going to happen to his data. So the purpose of backup ultimately is to not lose data. And going from a single hard drive to a RAID 5 is certainly one step in a proper direction of not losing data. So we're going to do a full session on backup. To answer your question directly, what did I do at Ultispeed? We use rsync, and we rsync the data directory of C-File once every night at midnight, and then once every week it rsyncs over to a machine that I just I physically swap hard drives, so I have a cold storage, so to speak, backup of that machine. And that's what we're doing right now. And that may get a little bit more complex because we are currently testing and playing with Bacula, and we'll report back and let you know how that works. Again, phone lines are open, 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 450-6624. We're live at AskNoahShow.com. Matthew is calling from Maine. Hi, Matthew. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hi, Noah. Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to let you know, I do IT IT services in a remote part of the country. And one of my client bases is small-town governments. Now, sometimes the small-town governments, there's a long time between initiating a deal and finalizing that deal because they have to go back and forth. There's that discussion, and the governments really meet basically once a month. And I was wondering if you have any idea on how to establish a business relationship with these governments so that I don't have this big lead time into closing a deal where the profits are relatively small.
Yeah, sure. So there's actually, it sounds like there's two questions in there. The first is, how do we establish those relationships? And then the second question is, how do we close those deals faster? And I have two different answers for you. So the first answer, how do you establish those relationships? Well, one of the things is just being involved in those communities, because a lot of the people that make those decisions, and we not fight this battle, but we are cognizant of this challenge, I should say, in Grand Forks, is a lot of the people that make those decisions, they're human beings and they're a part of the community. And so they're going to do business with other people that they know are part of the community and whose name comes to mind. And so, things that, so we try to be active with kids, getting kids involved with technology and helping out that way. We also try to do live events. So one of the things that I do personally is I go participate in our amateur radio events in town. At least I try to. And those kind of things, people run into you and they, that's Matthew. Matthew does IT stuff. Matthew is the guy that, he really knows that stuff. And so when they go to make a decision, they say, well, we need some computers for, the DMV office or whatever. Who are we going to call? Well, that Matthew guy, he always seems to be around. I wonder if he would be able to help us with something like that. So that networking thing. And the other thing is there's actually a lot of like structured events. So Grand Forks has this, it's like a small business community, and they I'm in their Facebook group and stuff, and so I get updates and stuff like that. But they even have like meetings and stuff. If I had time, I would attend those. That's a great way to get involved, and that's how you can get people to think of your name to begin with. It might not even hurt to offer some free service or some discounted service. To certain things, like you see a need, maybe your city have some machines that are going to go into a given office, and the budget's tight. Maybe you offer to go do the labor for free, and you just make your buck off the hardware. Maybe you go the other way, you give them the hardware it costs, and you just bill them for your labor, something like that. That would be a way to establish a relationship. Now, as to how you close government deals, that is a major pain of mine. It's a huge frustration. And the only thing that I have ever found that's come close to working, first of all, it's going to take forever anyway. And you're right. They put out bids. And so typically you don't make a lot of money off of the hardware sale anyway. And so you're making your money off of labor. But here's the thing I found that works the closest to speed those things up. Come up with what has been approved in the past. Because if you've done this before, then you submit a bid and they say, well, we need it to be below this price point, or we need these things, or we want those features or these specifications. And it's kind of a back and forth thing, right? Find out what sails through and where and then try submitting that bid the next time, even if it's with a different agency. So like, let's say, I'll give you an example. Most of the places that we have gone to are looking for i5s, 8 gigs of RAM, and a 1 terabyte hard drive. That's just off the top of my head. That's what a lot of places that are purchasing machines from us are looking for. So if I was going to go to a government facility, even if I didn't think they needed an i5, let's say it's the front desk girl, and she checks a web-based, there's a web-based software, whatever, so she spends all of her time in Chrome. Well, she probably doesn't need a Core i5 to do that. She could probably get that job done with an i3. And so it's tempting to say, well, I can undercut the other guy by offering a bid a little bit lower. That's a lot of those company, or especially, in government, they have these specification sheets that say, this is what we want, this is what we demand. And so they're going to stamp out anyone that doesn't meet those criteria. They're going to come back to you and say, well, actually, we'd like to get these specifications. So you can find a happy medium and say, this is kind of what seems to sail through every single time. You can start with that, and that kind of speeds it up a little bit. The other thing you can do, and this seems to work very well with the university system, I don't know if it would work so well with like small town city governments, but vouchers are a big thing. So the university system does not want to pay you directly in checks. They have this really weird program where if you sell them a piece of hardware, software, whatever, they, especially student organizations, is big. They will pay you in a voucher, and then you take the voucher and you take it down to the university, like payment office or administration office, and then they will exchange that for a check, and then you can cash it and get your money. The thing is, there is a lot of businesses that will not work with vouchers. They won't accept them. And so if you go out and say, hey, listen, I will work with you, whatever payment system you guys work with, I'm willing to jump through those hoops, that will give you a leg up. Is that at all helpful to you? Any of that?
Yeah, that's a lot of good information. Thank you very much.
We really appreciate your call, and thanks for joining us on the Ask Noah Show. Do me a favor, give me a call back. Let me know how that works for you. I'd be interested to hear. Working with government can always be a pain. Blue Zero is calling. Hi, Blue. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah.
Hey there. How can we help?
Hey, Noah. I've been having a weird time on GIMP the last last 2 months, and I cannot seem to crop the picture correctly. Do you know any alternatives to GIMP? I like GIMP way too much to not use it. It's more reliable, but the last 2 months there's been a weird glitch where I can't find the crop tool.
Okay, well, I guess let's start with this. The crop tool in GIMP is simply the little thing that looks like a square with the it doesn't look like a crop tool. I guess I would think of a crop tool. I would think like a scissor. It doesn't look like anything like what I would picture a crop tool. But you can definitely, it's a pretty simple thing to crop in GIMP. In fact, I use GIMP to crimp anytime I need to crop an image. I'm using GIMP. That's just it's kind of my go-to. But it actually isn't what I use for photo editing. GIMP is really kind of the software that you use for image creation, from scratch image creation. So there's two ways you can create images. The first way is completely from scratch. I'm an artist and I want to draw or create an image, or I want to take an existing image and I want to very granularly modify the image. That's the kind of thing where GIMP really comes in. For just general photo editing, I want to crop this photo, I want to color balance this, I want to tweak the white balance there, I want to do that. I actually recommend a different program. It's called Darktable. And Darktable is a fantastic piece of software for image editing, photo editing specifically, and you can import an entire photo library, and then you can go through and you can actually make all sorts of tweaks. So one of the things that Darktable supports that's really helpful is white balance profiling. And so, do you do a lot of photography?
I am a photographer, but I've mainly been messing around creating photos and all that using GIMP. I'm more familiar with GIMP than Darktable, but I will go to Darktable and dust out my camera.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example of where Darktable really fits the bill, and I thank you very much for the call. So let's say you take a picture, and the white balance is off, and so you go and fix it. And you go and re-white balance your camera, you take the picture, and you pull it into the photo editor, and yet again the white balance is off, and you start saying, okay, this camera, the way that this sensor works, I don't like the way that the auto white balance works, or even when I hold a piece of white paper up and I take it, I don't like it. And actually, Nikon there was a huge kerfluffle back with I think it was like the D610, and they had this issue where there was this whole series of sensors that had an issue where the white balance wasn't exactly, it was just a little bit off. And one of the things that Darktable helped me do when that problem first came up for a couple clients that were using Darktable to do photo editing was we were able to go build a template and say, this is how off the white balance is. So we made that correction. And also while you're at it, these couple tweaks, the picture just looks better when you make these couple tweaks. And you can make that template, and then you can just tell it, when I import from this particular photo library, automatically do all of these things to the images. And that kind of automation is fantastic, because then you can go back and you can just say, okay, well, this image, I got to tweak this a little bit, that image, I got to tweak that a little bit. And it really automates a lot of the process, a lot of the repetitive stuff that you really shouldn't have to do every single time. Again, phone lines 1-855-450-NOAH, 450-6624, live at AskNoahShow.com. Fedora 26 Now, you guys know that I'm a diehard advocate of CentOS on servers. Now, a big part of that, and I will admit this up front, is bias. I grew up banging on Red Hat boxes. And so I'm very familiar with it, and most of the issues that pop up in CentOS, I'm well versed in. I know exactly how to fix a lot of things, and I know where to look for certain symptoms, even if I've not used that particular software stack before. Now, I don't know how really to dive into this, but if you're a diehard user of a particular software stack, this even applies to a lesser extent to hardware, but you begin to feel the software, you begin to feel the hardware, and you'll get to a point where you can feel if the hardware or the software is working correctly. And you get to a point where at some point you can intuitively go to a place where something isn't working without being able to articulate why you're at that place or how you arrive there. So if I see I'll give you this is kind of a crappy example, but if I see an issue with the network stack, my fingers will automatically start banging out cd/etc/sysconfig/network-scripts. That has flowed out of my fingers before I can even think of what it is I want to troubleshoot, much less where I need to go to begin troubleshooting. If I see an issue with the network stack, it happens, and I don't even think about it. Being that in tune with an operating system, being that in tune with a given set of software, that does not pass as evidence of being a good operating system or a compelling reason for somebody to use the thing, but it does make it really, really, really hard to drag oneself away from it when you are that attached to a given, piece of software. And even putting my bias aside, CentOS and Red Hat have the backing of one of the largest open source companies to date. In the business world, selling Red Hat these days is a lot like what I would describe selling IBM back in the 90s. And it's funny, there used to be a saying back in the 90s. The saying was, no one's ever been fired for selling IBM. And that is very true in 2017. In the Linux world, every school I go to, every government, we're just talking about government agency, every government agency I go to, every rinky-dink client office, everyone has heard of Red Hat. And Canonical's Ubuntu is probably the close second thing. And certainly in the amateur Linux circles or in the development circles, it's probably more prevalent than Red Hat. And with Canonical, most people will tell you that it's a 5-year upgrade cycle. So they'll say, well, we publish security updates on the LTS for 5 years, and so you should probably plan on upgrading your service every 5 years. But I know people that are using RHEL 5. That could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. I don't know. It depends on how you look at it, I guess. But the reality is, if you want a machine that you can put into production and you're not going to touch it, and that's what you come as a client and tell me that's what you want, I'm going with Red Hat every single time. And for those of you who don't understand why I'm using the terms Red Hat and CentOS interchangeably, Red Hat is a product that is very reasonably priced, if you ask me. I believe it starts at $300 a year for licensing, and CentOS has the same code. It has just been compiled by somebody else, and then they pulled all of the Red Hat logos and Red Hat name off of it because, Red Hat didn't appreciate them stealing that. And before those of you who are spinning up Thunderbird right now to fire off for an email, or maybe you're fighting your way through Nihilist to write me a message, and you're telling me the code level is technically different. No, it's technically different. I sat in a class not that long ago with an instructor from Red Hat who says it's binary compatible. So you can he actually told the class, do all of your work in CentOS, and you can pass a Red Hat test. So that's close enough for me. Okay, moving on. Calls 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. Live at AskNoahShow.com. So I'm an unapologetic fan of CentOS on the server, but what do you do about desktop Linux? Now, typically, I've been recommending Ubuntu proper. When I say Ubuntu proper, I mean Ubuntu with Unity. Up until I killed Unity. However, with the recent changes coming to GNOME, there is a lot less difference from a user's perspective between Ubuntu and Fedora. There's a couple of you that think, no, you're crazy. There's huge differences between, Fedora and Ubuntu. Now, obviously, under the hood, it's completely different. Different package manager, different update process, different update schedule, different upgrade schedule, different software availability. Everything is different under the hood. But most users that we support, we set all that jazz up for them. If you call Altispeed Technologies, we don't come out and say, well, we recommend Fedora. Here's a disk. Have at it, Haas. we install the operating system, we install all of the software packages. If third-party repos are necessary, we add all of that. So as a client, you're not doing that anyway. And, once we get done with all of that, the reality is that opening Chrome up on Fedora, pretty much identical to opening Chrome up on... It is identical. Like opening Chrome up on Fedora is identical to opening Fedora up on Ubuntu. It's the same thing. Same thing with Firefox, same thing with Thunderbird. They're all exactly the same. That's because both distros are now centering around GNOME. Now, some of you know I used to be a Fedora on every box I touched kind of guy. And when I started going more of the advocacy route, I started using Ubuntu more and more because Ubuntu has the name recognition in the desktop world. When you go ask 10 people, have you ever heard of Linux? They're probably going to say, yeah, I've heard of Linux, I've heard of Ubuntu. I stand by what I said. If you go into, to some place that's, that has a cluster of servers, you ask them if they've heard of Red Hat, and chances are they probably heard of both. But, Red Hat is it's a selling name inside the servers. Ubuntu is a very good selling name inside desktops. And when I started doing more and more JB stuff, I went back to GNOME in the way of Antargos. And now I am seriously considering coming full circle back to Fedora for a couple of reasons. First is I've been playing with Fedora 26. 16. I've been playing with Fedora 26, and it is by far the best release of Fedora yet. 2, I can still do my day job supporting others, even if they choose to use Ubuntu, because the majority of problems that users run into are unrelated to the backend infrastructure, and they're more related to the desktop environment or the UI system. So, for example, somebody wants the ping indicator. That's irrelevant if it's Ubuntu or Fedora. It's going to work, and I can solve software backend problems pretty quickly. Anyway, the real thing, it's when somebody wants their trackpad shut off, they want touch to click shut off, they want the trackpad speed increased, or they want a different Wi-Fi profile. All of that stuff falls under are GNOME issues. So as long as I'm using the same desktop environment, should be fine. Third, Fedora seems to be restructuring themselves more as a workstation OS. And this is something that's been very encouraging to me because for the longest time, I always felt like Fedora was an okay operating system for me because I didn't mind if I hit a couple bumps along the road, and Fedora was leading edge, not bleeding edge like Antargos, but leading edge. But I was hesitant to ever recommend it to anyone else. Well, it seems more and more with every release, they are moving more and more towards this desktop Linux user-centered workstation type OS. And I'm very, very comfortable with placing my clients in the hands of Red Hat's community spin-off of a desktop operating system. I like that idea. I like that concept. And, a lot of people have said, well, I don't really understand. Red Hat is the back-end servers, and then you have this CentOS, which is the community enterprise operating system. So where does Fedora fit in? And I've always seen Red Hat and CentOS as server operating systems, and Fedora as kind of a desktop operating system. Not that you can't. There's plenty of people that are using CentOS or Red Hat as desktops, especially if you're working in a workstation scientific type environment. There's plenty of people that are using Fedora on servers. Not saying you can't do it. I think that's kind of where, if you try and get VLC and you go on a forum and ask on a Red Hat forum how to install VLC on Red Hat, they're going to tell you, why are you installing VLC on Red Hat? It's a server distro. Again, phone lines 1-855-450-NOAA. It's 855-450-6624 or live at AskNoahShow.com. So Fedora 26 came out last week, I think the 11th, if I'm not mistaken. And I personally believe, I'm an expert on my own opinion, that this is the best release of Fedora yet. You know it, I know it, everyone knows it. It's the best. Now, it starts with the upgrade process. Part of my nuke and pave mentality that you'll see if you ever meet me in person or if you hire me as a consultant comes from my humble beginnings as a kid running with Fedora. I learned very early on that a nice, clean install always beats a maybe will work at best, but will keep all your junk from your last install upgrade. Now, the upgrade process in Fedora 26, next level amazing. The graphical guide makes it feel almost like you're reinstalling the operating system from the perspective of control. It's extremely granular. It's not just a click here, click the button, and we upgrade the process, and if it doesn't work, then we tell you got to reinstall anyway. It's not like that. It's very, very good. And I've spoken to some people that have done it through the CLI. They've had equally pleasant experiences, although admittedly not as granular. Now, I have personally upgraded 3 machines. zero problems on all three machines. I'm 3 for 3, and they run flawlessly. And I'm a big Fedora fan. And I have been a big Fedora fan for a long time, but that's impressive for them because I have not always, I've not always had a lot of faith in the Fedora upgrade process. And I did some online research to see if other users had the same experience as I have. And I chatted with one guy on Telegram that said, yeah, man, my upgrade process was noticeably smoother than it has been in the past. But I did see an issue, and this is, on a couple different sites. We'll have it linked in the show notes, where some users had an issue with libd, which is the daemon used to track the database changes. Now, I'm also, at the moment, I'm sitting in my RV. I'm right next door to a veteran of the Linux community, Mr. Chris Fisher, and so I was chatting with him last night about Fedora and the upgrade experience, and he said, like many others, he had a silky smooth experience. Now, he's actually an interesting case because he spun up a machine on Fedora like 22 or 23 or something like that, just to see how long he could run a Fedora machine. And he said he has been upgrading it every single time, and he has some containers running in there, and he's got some virtual servers, and he's got Cockpit. And he said, I think he actually did his upgrade through Cockpit, if I'm not mistaken. And he said that it's been flawless since 22, 23, 24, whatever it's been. And so they've really made some headway. And all the users I could find that were having issues with the upgrade process, with that libd, they were testing the beta. So maybe the Fedora team has solved this particular issue, and this is not an issue anymore. But all I can tell you is on the 3 machines that I upgraded myself, the process was remarkably smoother in the past, and it has fundamentally made me rethink what I'm going to be using as a distro moving forward. Because if I'm stuck on CentOS on the server, it really makes a lot of sense to have Red Hat's desktop distro running on my laptop. At least it would seem to. By the way, before it sounds like I'm ragging on the Fedora team, I still prefer a clean install to an upgrade on any distro, even if it's a flawless upgrade. So even with all of these changes done to Fedora, and even though it works great, I would still prefer a clean upgrade. And really what it amounts to is just the amount of junk that collects in my home folder. In your home folder, especially if you're on hide, Control H, look at all the hidden folders. You have profiles, and the amount of crud just irritates the heck out of me. It's just stupid how much stuff collects inside of your home folder. And so the ability to kind of clean all that out is really helpful. And then the other problem is I'm a bit of a digital pack rat. So I tend to never delete anything, and I just organize it a little bit better. And then when I run out of things to organize, or when I don't know where that particular thing fits, it just stays in my download folder. So, it's like Windows 2nd edition, disk 16. Yeah, I better keep that. I might need that someday. You never know. It could come up. Might have a client that has Windows 98 and is missing disk 16. So I better keep a copy of that. That's the kind of dumb things that are in my downloads. It's just stupid. So, but I'm not going to back that stuff up. So if I reinstall, it's an opportunity for me to kind of close my eyes, pinch my nose, and like, okay, we're erasing everything. Hopefully I got everything. In addition to the upgrade process, Fedora 26, like Fedora 25, is not something new in 26, but they have support for ARM. Now, interestingly enough, it was Ubuntu Mate that really drove me down this particular point, but being able to run the exact same distribution on my $35 project computer that I'm running on my $3,500 workstation in my office seems to be incredibly useful. In fact, I went almost an entire week without noticing I was on a Pi until I went to install a particular package and it wasn't in the repo and I couldn't figure out why. I'm like, I know this package is in here. It worked on my other boxes. Why isn't it working? Oh, yeah, this is the ARM version. And so, yeah, the Pi 3 is that good. And we were talking about that earlier with Chris DeLuca. We've gotten to the point where we have the software even running over a network stack and just bringing in a remote desktop. The Pi feels that responsive. They've done a really great job. And that's a $35 computer. So imagine what happens if you buy one of these L300, actual thin clients, or you buy even these Ryzen computers for a couple $100. So, and yet again, you have some really cool individual pieces coming together to make a terrific whole. This is kind of like when we had, when we had the community centering around GNOME and Systemd and stuff like that. You have an amazing enterprise-grade billion with a B dollar company that is funding a desktop project that is tailored more and more and more for workstations. At the same time, you have an operating system that is available for use on a $35 project computer that you can Amazon Prime to your house. And a veteran of the IT administration for 15 years is telling you that he used it for a week as a replacement to his office workstation. Oh, and by the way, they still continue to refine that distro and the upgrade process to the point that it's silky smooth for most users. But that's not even the best part. That's not even the best part of Fedora 26, and it's actually, we're running towards the bottom of the hour, so I'm not going to get to dig into this as deep as I wanted to. My favorite part of Fedora 26 is Fleet Commander. And I feel like I should have a really cool reverb effect when I say that, but if you haven't heard of Fleet Commander, and we'll have a link in the show notes, but oh my gosh, this is amazing. Now, full disclosure, I have not used this in production yet, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. But boy, oh boy, am I ready to use Fleet Commander in production. Again, phone lines 1-855-450-NOAA, 450-6624, live at AskNoahShow.com. You get a couple minutes if you want to try and sneak a call in there. Basically, Fleet Commander is an application that allows you to manage the desktop configuration of network users and laptops and workstations on a network. It is primarily geared towards a GNOME desktop, but there are two components. The first is the Cockpit plugin that serves as the administration interface. Now, if you're not familiar with what Cockpit is that server administration tool that's web-based, ships with Fedora, but works on a number of different distros. Very soon, we are testing it right now in this room that we call the sandbox at Altispeed. And the sandbox is kind of this room where we have switches and routers and computers and stuff. And basically, it's just anytime we want to try something, how's this going to work in production? Well, let's simulate it in the sandbox and see if we're ready for production. We're actually going to, if everything keeps going the way it has been going in the sandbox, we're going to roll Cockpit out on all of our actual production servers. But it requires a plugin for Cockpit, and then there's a client daemon that runs on every host of the network. And interestingly enough, I've been so in love with libvirt lately, but this Fleet Commander actually relies on libvirt and KVM to generate the data for the VMs running in the environment as the rest of the network. And so basically, you install this system, and what you can do then is you can create these templates for these machines, these configuration templates, and I believe they call profiles, I think, and then once you have these profile templates, VM templates built, then you can spin up these machines and have them take this templated data. And if you picture this in a large scale system, right? So we have clients that they have a number of different servers, serve a number of different tasks, but we can scale infrastructure up or down based on their needs dynamically, because I can tell it, hey, this is a machine that I need to have this particular configuration. These kinds of machines, I need this particular configuration. So, the web server is running a little lower. It's getting a lot of traffic or whatever, and let's put a load balancer up and spin a couple more up. The ability to manage that stuff at a network level really seems to be next level. And one of the things that Chris DeLuca and I were talking about is, up until we had things, like RASDC, that allowed us to emulate a lot of the stuff that Windows had on domain controllers, Windows kind of had a leg up on easy administration, because the group policy management on Windows is actually stupid simple. Like, any idiot can figure that out. And to get those, you can do the same thing on Linux. Don't get me wrong. If you do LDAP and Kerberos and some other things, you can get central authentication. You can set all that stuff up. But it's like you're putting every piece in place by hand. Whereas with Windows, you're literally clicking a button, and then you add, these particular machines to your system, and then all of a sudden it just works. So this centrally managed type system thing is something that, especially at ease of use, is something that has not readily been seen in the Linux world. And things like Fleet Commander are changing that from the ground up, because now you have the ability to it's literally two DNF commands. You install the plugin on Cockpit, you install the daemon, start the daemon up, and you're up and running. And then the whole thing can be managed from Cockpit on a Fedora server, CentOS server, Red Hat server, whatever you want, or Ubuntu server, it doesn't matter. But you can actually spin this stuff up, and you can control all this stuff from a central portal. It's all web based, so it's really something that I think is really cool, and we're going to keep our eyes on it. And again, full disclaimer: have not used this in production. Played with it in a VM a little bit while I'm out here at the campground on vacation, but I'm going to dig into it, a lot further. And we're gonna, after we get if we decide to go forward with Cockpit, and then the next thing we'll probably be testing will probably be this Fleet Commander. We'll set that up in the sandbox and let that run for a little bit and bang on it and see if we can make it break. Hey guys, do you have a question? It couldn't make it into the show. We have the answer for you. AskNoahShow.com. That's the Ask Noah dashboard. You can head over there to that website, click on the contact link, and we'll make sure to answer those questions at the bottom of the hour if we have some time for it. Andrew writes in and he asks, "Hi Noah, question for the show. Why do all the main players in the market ship their GNU/Linux distributions without any major modifications or tweaks in the desktop environment? i.e. Fedora, plain GNOME 3, Kubuntu, plain KDE, etc. We can both agree that KDE and GNOME 3 without any extra extensions, tweaking, or changing settings are very difficult to use. You need to invest your time to make it more easy to use, and personally, I have the impression that only Unity and Cinnamon are the usable desktop environments out of the box. Why don't they personalize their own products a little bit, like, let's say, Manjaro, i3, or KDE is a great example. Custom themes, icons, etc. Going further, new Ubuntu will be shipped with plain GNOME 3. I'm wondering if there's any reason behind that. P.S. Love your show. Keep up the good works. Andrew. Well, I agree with you. I agree with just about everything you wrote in that email. I want to start out and point out Mr. Martin Wimpers, because Wimpy is shipping the Ubuntu Mate project, and from what I've seen, it is anything but stock. Everything is tweaked to perfection. Now, Wimpy actually works for Canonical, so hopefully a lot of the same passion and ideas that he had for Ubuntu Mate will make their way into the next iterations of Ubuntu. We have it on good authority that Canonical will actually be tweaking some of the things that Ubuntu, Canonical will tweak some of the things that GNOME is doing to make it more friendly. And of course, you have System 76, which is heavily tweaking, an Ubuntu base with GNOME 3, so heavily tweaked that they're not even calling it Ubuntu, or at least that's the plan. So I think you are starting to see the tide change a little bit. I agree with you 100%. I think GNOME out of the box is completely useless. I think Unity was useful out of the box. I haven't played a lot with Cinnamon, so I guess I can't comment to that. But I will tell you that I think that Ubuntu Mate completely usable out of the box. I rarely, if ever, change anything on Ubuntu Mate. In fact, I have two Ubuntu Mate boxes running in production right now that power this very show, the Ask Noah show. Both of them are running stock right out of the box. Haven't made a change to them. By the way, if you're running GNOME 3 and you'd like to know how to tweak your GNOME 3 desktop to eke the most amount of performance out of it and make it look the best, check out AskNoahShow.com. Take a look at one of our past episodes. We actually did an episode on tweaking the GNOME 3 desktop. Got one last question. Alex writes in and asks, "Hi, Noah. I'm a young university professor and have been listening to Last Unplugged for a long time. I switched 100% to Linux 2 years ago, and my whole workflow and to open source software. Now that I'm getting a PhD, students, and have funding to buy a Linux laptop, I think I will try to switch my whole research group to Linux." And as we're running out of time, I'm going to summarize the rest of his email. Basically, he's asking the best way to switch his students to Linux. What I would say is, lead by example. You switch yourself to Linux. You give all of your assignments, maybe produce all of your class syllabus in something like ODF. The thing is, I've never really had if a professor hands out a syllabus and says, here's the electronic syllabus, it's an ODF, but by the way, you can download the software for free, there's really no penalty. Even if a student starts out with, a Mac laptop and Microsoft Office, it's fine. You can go download LibreOffice to open that document if it doesn't open up in Microsoft Office, and maybe ask those students to submit their projects in ODF. Start at that level where you're not necessarily changing out the operating system, you're just changing out the tools on top. And then over time, you can move them over to, specific tools, if that's a direction they want to go. Or maybe, you have like an after class thing. You say, well, Thursdays after class, I'm going to hang around here for an hour. And if anyone wants to learn about this other operating system, we could do that. And I actually worked with a group of students that did something very similar in Grand Forks. I'll have to check in with them and see how it's going. That brings us to the end of this week's episode. A huge thanks to Sarah, our call screener, Ben, our producer, and Rakai, our video editor. We'll hand you off to Crosspoint coming up next on Logos Radio, KEQQ, 88.3 LPFM, Grand Forks.